Yo, what's up, everyone? I'm excited for you to join the Davidson Hang podcast. We have a repeat. We have Ryan Johnson, who's so good that you have to have him on the podcast again. As anyone who knows Ryan Johnson knows that he just crushes life and everything. He's always the top rep and destroys every record known to mankind, and just a guy that you want in your corner. I know I'll be working for him one day. But yeah, I'm excited to have you back on the podcast, Ryan.
Well, thanks for having me, Davidson. Again, I'm excited to come back, and yeah, I gotta always pump your brakes on hyping me up. So thanks for the compliments there. Yeah, excited to be
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. So Ryan, so since we last spoke, so before he was the top senior sales development rep at LinkedIn, and now he is officially an account executive at LinkedIn Sales Solutions, which deals with the Sales Navigator tools. And yeah, and he's already just crushing it and just making a splash as an account executive, which comes no surprise to anyone. But yeah, would love to learn a little bit more about why you think you've had more success than most people. Don't say it's luck, man, because like that's a cop out. You can't say luck.
Yeah, well, I've definitely had some things like fall my way, and like felt like I was super prepared from the rep who I inherited my book from.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of awesome people in my corner. My like team is extremely helpful and impactful, especially remotely. I feel like I would call them every day. I still do, like once a day, everyone, just how do I do this? What do I need to do? So my team's been awesome. But yeah, I think just in terms of like being set up for success in an AE role, I think it goes back to like the foundation of sales development.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in sales development probably for a little over a year and a half, maybe 20 months. Um, and that really allows you to hone in your skills. So I actually have read a few articles on like the success of sales development reps as AEs, and
Mm-hmm.
pretty much like the longer you're in the role, the more successful you are as an AE.
Yeah.
And I think it accelerates your ramp time just because you're doing so much of the job already.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to prospecting and generating conversations and generating meetings. And
Mm-hmm.
if you can generate as many as possible, some are bound to fall in your lap and go your way. So I think that's probably like the biggest thing was um, having a strong foundation from sales development, and then understanding like what I needed to focus on in the new role to
Mm-hmm.
take things to the next step.
Yeah, that's actually a good point because I do if you are fortunate enough to have a transition, right? Not everyone, some people just go straight into it, whether it's like a new book or whatever it is. But if you do have that ability, right, just making sure that you're really communicating, you're on the same page as whoever's book you're taking over is crucial. I wish I did a better job of that, going into my book, knowing what I know now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and they've, hopefully the rep before you has, they've done a lot of legwork. They've worked these accounts. They've started conversations, and that was something I was really focused on, was like not letting anything fall through the cracks in that
Mm.
transition, to take advantage of all of the amazing work they had already done. So, yeah, Megan Zabrowski was my rep that I inherited her book, and she definitely set me up for success. Spent a lot of time like meeting with
Mm.
her and getting introductions and conversations started. And I think it
Yeah.
also gives you like you can start re-engaging customers that were in your book that may have, ended up going dark or put things on pause because you have a new voice, you have a new face.
Mm.
Which that in itself can almost be like a new incentive to be like, hey, like let's restart these conversations.
Yes, especially as someone as charismatic as a Ryan Johnson, like it's hard to say no to you, especially with that face on your icon, like on that logo. Like if I saw that, I'd be like, of course I'm taking a meeting with him.
I don't
Like
know if
Brad Pitt, you know.
my emails come across that way. So
That no, that's a good point though. It's similar to why you were so successful as a SDR, because you were so good with transitions that, I mean, you did most of the legwork for us, right? So we just had to make sure we don't like mess it up and like, obviously there's like a little bit more to it, right? But like that transition was so crucial, right? Because you did like a pretty deep like discovery before, so you've already like uncovered the pain points, right? So we're just doing like maybe like a little bit like more like additional discovery, like for maybe to fill in some of the gaps that if there were any, right? But I think that's probably why you've been so successful because you've already essentially mastered the art of transition in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I didn't really think about it that way, but I think transitioning is a really important aspect of a sales role, just being able to transition conversations or transition from person to person, and making sure things don't get lost in
Mm.
transition or lost in that communication as well. Especially in my prior role, I was in an inbound role, so like very high volume, setting up a lot of conversations, and that can definitely get confusing,
Mm.
or customers aren't even sure what's going on. You really have to manage your expectations with them as
Yeah.
well. So the transition piece, I think, was huge.
Yeah. And man, it's crazy to think it's been almost exactly 100 episodes later, but like what do you think you've learned since we've had, because I'm sure you have grown a lot since then, even though you're quite talented and really good at what you did then, like what would you say you've learned in the last year or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've learned a lot, like both personally and professionally. Yeah, I think the last time we did this was right before COVID-19 started, and obviously things shifted drastically from like a workplace and workforce and how we're even working, how we were doing work. So I
Mhm.
think there was a lot to learn in that capacity. But then professionally as well, I think it also helped me just understand that our prospects are people too.
Mm.
And people always say that, but at the end of the day, like they're going through the same transitions as you as well. Um,
Mm.
whether they're moving, or maybe they've got COVID, maybe they've had to shut
Mm.
down their office because of COVID, like all of the same things that you're experiencing, they're also experiencing, especially with like
Mm.
a global crisis like the pandemic. So I think that was like a big takeaway there, and how you can sort of lead with empathy and also understanding.
Mm.
The second piece for me, at the same time, a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum, but the more I was in my sales development role, was just understanding like patience as well. Because I
Mm.
think, especially starting out as a rep, I had a tendency to like be very impatient. Like I definitely had
Mm.
the mindset that like my customer was also thinking about this all day, every day, when in reality,
Uh,
like I'm a very like short spurt of 30 minutes on their calendar, maybe
mm.
once every couple of weeks, versus
Yeah.
to me, they're like my entire life, right? So they're
Uh,
something that I'm constantly thinking about. So that was a big awakening to just kind of shift my perspective and be like, okay, my customers have a lot of other things going on. So,
mm.
patience can be important. I may not be there. Well, this is a priority for them. They have a lot of other priorities that they're managing and dealing and handling. So the
Yeah.
patience would be the second piece. And then the third would just be overall, I think, skill development. So finding creative ways to develop your skills, especially if you've been in like a sales development role for quite a while or quite some time. Like, are there ways to lean in to find opportunities to continue to growing your skills, whether that's
Mm.
partnering with AEs to join their deal cycles and their conversations, or shadowing calls, all that
Yeah.
type of stuff. I think you can get really creative with, to get mimic some of the skill sets of an AE while you're an SD.
Yeah, you did a really good job. I'm not gonna lie. Like you're always interested and you followed up with us where you didn't have to, right? I mean, you were rare in that sense that you always wanted to know what was going on after the transition, right? Like that, I think that was rare. No one really did that. And obviously it shows, right? Like you were promoted, and you're seeing a lot of success, and it's been a roughly easy transition for you, it seems like. Whereas like I think with most folks it would take longer to like get to the same amount of revenue that you've closed already. I mean, you're closing essentially like a fully ramped rep is, right? as a someone who's still ramping?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's been easy. There's been a lot of trials and tribulations, but I do think being interested and engaged in the rest of the deal cycle as a sales development rep is really important,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, like that's how the business makes money, that's how the rep makes money, and the more you can align sort of your goals with the rep's goals, um, I think the more successful the partnership can be.
Yeah.
Obviously, like from a sales development perspective, you're focused on, you know, the 0 to 15% of, you know, sort of the pipeline, but
Hmm.
you know, there's a whole 85% that has to happen. And, you know, how
Hmm.
can you help ensure in those first conversations that you're setting everyone up for success, both the customer, both the rep? And then, you know, I think that's where a lot of the excitement happens is, you know, the rest of the 85% that you don't really get to see unless you put yourself out there and seek interest and want to get involved.
Hmm. This might be interesting question, but what have you learned from the learning LinkedIn sales solution side that maybe some of the learning folks can implement that would benefit like maybe some of our processes as an A in LinkedIn learning solutions?
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think both of them like go back to just like core sales skills, I think across the board, you know, like strong discovery and being able to basically map your product or your solution back to the overall like business objectives and what they're focused on accomplishing. So I don't
Mhm.
know if I've necessarily noticed like a huge difference per se that would be like obviously other than the product itself. Um, but I think that it is interesting because you are selling to two completely different sort of archetypes. So obviously on LinkedIn Learning, we're focused on like HR and learning and development folks, versus on the sales solution side, you know, you're talking to a lot of VPs of sales, chief revenue officers in the SMB space, and you know sometimes even VPs of marketing as well. So there's a little bit of difference in terms of who you're talking to, like how they communicate, what their
Mhm.
objectives are, um, and sometimes like their objectives can feel like more tied to the business because you're like, oh, obviously you want to generate more revenue. Like, what's the strategy to sort of get there?
Yeah.
Versus on the learning side, you know, they may be indirectly
Hmm.
correlated and you have to really uncover that. You know, like for
Ah.
example, we might be focused on technology skill sets. Okay, well, what's that sort of impact, or how is that sort of impacting the overall business and some of the business objectives? So yeah, just
Hmm.
totally two completely different conversations, but I think it goes back to the same sales skills like discovery and being able to map that to their overall objectives.
Yeah, what I heard from your share is that because ours is a little bit more indirect, right, in terms of the big overarching business objectives, just doing a little bit more like painting the picture and connecting the dots so that
Mm-hmm.
it does ultimately have the impact on the business. But it's like we might have to do a little bit more work because, like you said, it's not as clear as like clearly like if you're a CMO or a CRO, like they it's very obvious what that impact is, right? Whereas like even with technology or anything learning and training development, it's like I feel like there needs to be more like telling that story and connecting the dots so that it's like very clear this is the ROI on
Mm-hmm.
that solution.
Yeah, and I would also add, you know, sometimes that can make it on the surface seem easy, like, oh, that's what they're focused on, but at the end of the day, it's kind of the how or the why, like why are you focused on this or how are you planning
Mm,
on getting there? So I think at first, like in my first couple months, I was like, oh great, I had unlocked the code. Like you're looking
mm,
to grow three times this year in terms of revenue. But kind
mm,
of missed like the second layer of okay, well, why are
mm,
you looking to grow at this scale or how are you
mm.
going to do that? And I
Yeah.
think that's where like the real impactful discovery starts to come into play.
And because you've worked with both learning folks and like or slash HR and then CMOs slash like more client facing folks or more, do you feel that they both speak differently? Like how are they different? Like our VP of sales, like are they more direct? Or are they more like you know what I mean? Like how would you profile the two types of buyer personalities?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit more directness from this, like a sales leader, primarily because they're in sales. Like they sort of get it. You can be a little more transparent. Like, hey, just want to do some discovery to see if this even makes sense. Um,
Hmm.
versus folks that are maybe less in like a customer facing or sales role, um, just might not have as much history with having those types of conversations. So I think there's definitely a little bit of a difference in terms of just like the customer itself and just given their experiences and their background.
Hmm.
But that's like any customer, if you've got someone in L&D who spent some time in marketing or sales, they may have a different take on that as well.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm curious, like what do you think is the future of sales? Like, do you see any trends in terms of like is social selling becoming even more important? Because I know obviously because of the pandemic, everything's converting over to virtual. Do you see
Hmm.
that as something that's it's always gonna, or do you think slowly there's still gonna be a certain percentage that will want to do like the in-person face-to-face meetings and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I read a McKinsey article recently that said around 87% of buyers prefer the virtual buying experience. Don't quote me on that. It was either
Wow.
87 or 78.
Wow.
Prefer the virtual buying experience in some capacity. So I think obviously right now we're definitely itching to be back with people and engage with
Mhm.
customers face to face. But I think there will be a portion of that stays. And some industries have probably been disrupted a lot more than others. And I think there's
Yeah.
probably some that just given the nature of the product will definitely be more face to face or in person. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting article. And I think because of that, we're also seeing a little bit more of like a gap in just like being able to connect with customers, like their
Mm.
emails inboxes are just flooded with emails from people trying to sell them stuff. So I
Yeah.
do think social selling will continue to become more and more important.
Hmm.
Just finding creative ways to get your customers' attention, whether that's like an
Hmm.
introduction from someone you know in common, or whether that's just doing more homework and understanding a
Hmm.
little bit about what their personal interests are.
Why do you think so many people are taking the lazy way out and just copy and pasting like these like generic, like I don't know. I feel like it just gives us such a bad rap, right? Like there's so many folks that are just, I don't know if it's just like they lack like the social awareness, but like I don't know. It just seems like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of good stuff out there too, right? But I'm
Mm-hmm.
not even a decision maker and I still get pinged like every freaking day on LinkedIn on like stuff that it's like, dude, like, did you even read my profile? Like, so I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, I don't, it's a good question. I mean, even some, like, I'm definitely guilty of it sometimes of like sending the the wrong message to the wrong person, or taking a little bit more of a generic approach.
Hmm.
When in reality, I like definitely know customization is the way to go. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think maybe it just goes back to just kind of like the pressure of being like a rep, and
Hmm.
just like kind of having that mindset of like I need to get activity, I need to get outreach. Like hopefully that will lead to something.
Yeah.
Um, and at the end of the day, maybe it feels better if you send 50 generic emails than five personalized ones. But you're probably going to see that connect rate on those five personal ones a lot higher. That's probably going to actually lead to those conversations. So yeah, it's a great question. I think it's definitely something I'm still trying to focus on, is just being as personal as possible, as much as possible. And then
Hmm.
definitely seeing that's where like my actual opportunities will come from.
Yeah. But to go back to your point earlier about like sellers are finding it tougher to really connect on that deep level with clients, back when we were seeing them in person. I saw Jesse's article, Rothstein's article. For those of you who don't know, he's he's like a key account manager. So he works with the largest accounts with LinkedIn Sales Solutions. And he was talking about exactly that topic, right? How like people sales sellers are really struggling to really connect. So we have to be innovative. We have to think of like ways to on how to connect, right? Because
Hmm.
we can't like wine and dine, or we can't really do that. You know, we can't. It sometimes it's harder to read the and a lot of times like clients will have their video off, right? So how do you read their body language when we all know that's like half of sales?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, I mean, I think I've been trying to figure that out. And, even as a seller, it's like you're on Zoom all day. Like your attention
Yeah,
span's only so long. Someone
yeah.
in our someone in our team meeting yesterday, Sarah Monday, one of my teammates, she said that if you turn off your own video camera, that can help you be more engaged. Not turn off your own video camera. You turn off your ability to see yourself.
Yes,
So you're only
I
seeing
agree.
the customer
Yes,
or
you're not
whoever you're
staring at
talking
yourself.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not distracted by yourself, which is
Yeah.
interesting. So that could
That's
be
true.
one tip. One thing I've also tried is anytime there's an opportunity where I can make a Zoom call more fun,
Uh-huh.
uh, just doing that, like changing your background to something that your customer is interested in. I had a customer visit,
Ah.
like I guess he, I had someone I was working with that was a huge Oregon Ducks football fan,
Huh.
and my roommate actually had an Oregon Ducks football jersey, so I wore
Ah.
it to our call
Ah.
just to make it a little bit more fun.
That's so
Or
smart.
anytime you could maybe include someone on a call that may know them or may have
Huh.
insight about their business, just to kind of mix it up, I think is also an
Mm.
interesting perspective. Because yeah, you're right. Our customers are also having Zoom calls all day, and if
Hmm.
there's some way you can make it a little bit more exciting for them, maybe it keeps them a little bit more engaged.
Hmm.
Or even like doing shorter Zoom calls too. Like maybe you do
Mm.
more frequent but shorter calls.
Uh,
Like I don't know, the attention span of people probably doesn't last too long past 30 minutes. So that's something I've also been
yeah.
thinking, like, should I be doing shorter meetings and maybe more frequent ones?
Hmm. I love your creativity, man. That's why you're the Ryan Johnson. It's no surprise why you just crush everything, man. Like you're just full of ideas, and it's at the end of the day, it's thoughtfulness, right? Like you're thoughtful in your approach. Like you come prepared, like you do your due diligence, like you're not just winging it, right? There's like a certain level of professionalism that comes with like a Ryan Johnson meeting, right?
I hope so. Hopefully,
That's
hopefully my
awesome.
customers think that. But yeah, that was probably a huge transition piece for me coming from sales development to an AE world where my SD role was super high volume. So I definitely didn't have as much time, and that really
Mm.
wasn't my role to be as prepared for conversations. It's more like, hey,
Yeah.
let's call, let's move on. But in the AE role, like preparation is huge because you might only get one chance to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So that's been something that I've been really focused on is how to come as prepared as possible to a conversation to make it as valuable as possible. But it's
Mm.
funny, even if you come prepared, it's still hard to execute on it. You know, it,
Yeah. It's
the client can take things a lot of different directions. So there's still an
yeah.
element of how do I control this conversation, and I did a lot of preparation. How can I make sure that counts? But
Mm.
maybe that's totally irrelevant to what they care about.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I can imagine VP of sales are really good at controlling the conversation, right? So they know how to steer you in many different ways because like I mean that's what they do for a living, right? Like so I can see how that can be I wouldn't say conflicting, but I can see how like they have their own agenda, they have their own questions like respecting that, but also like hey, you need these questions to really be able to serve them at the highest level, right?
Yeah, definitely a fine balance. And also I think it comes with, like, this is something I definitely have not developed, but it comes with like confidence of just like being in the role a little bit and having the
Mm.
confidence to, just like say no or push back or
Yeah.
set the tone. And that
Mm.
for me right now is something I definitely haven't grasped. definitely working
Yeah.
on it. But yeah, it's easier said than done. So I think confidence can also be a key piece.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I've heard a couple people say it, but they say like we want your business, but we don't need it. Just
Hmm.
kind of having like that mentality,
Push,
especially if you're
pushing back.
getting a lot of pushback. Not maybe not saying that directly to the customer, but just kind of like
Hmm.
having that mindset. Um,
Huh. I I could see that. I could see how, because at the end of the day, like you want to challenge someone respectfully where they think like they have that aha moment where they're like, oh wow, like if nothing changes, like if there's no, because I'm sure sometimes you lose to the status quo, right? Especially in SMB. So it's like, well, if I don't make any shift, then I can't really expect anything different. I expect the results that I currently have, which is probably not the results that I want, right? And how do you do that in a way that gets them to be like, huh, and actually take action on it, not just like, oh, okay, but yeah, not now, like maybe like 3 months later. It's like, well, what's really going to change in 3 months? How do you know
yeah,
we're still not going to be in the same exact situation, the same pandemic, the same thing? And then when you get people to actually see, like, oh crap, then like they might do something about it. But I'm sure the status quo is like, I think that's most salespeople's like worst enemy, especially in SMB.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that goes back to yeah, hopefully have done the discovery to understand like how you
Mhm.
can actually impact things. But yeah, at the end of the day, like sometimes people just they just want to wait or they don't want to do anything. And timing's like the one thing you can't really control as a rep. So
Yeah.
just, just understanding what those timelines look like and obviously driving urgency as much as possible.
Well,
Um,
and this, I think that's it though. If you do a good, I truly believe that if we as sales reps do a good enough discovery, like a full out discovery, then everything takes care of itself because
yeah.
we've dug deep enough where you can connect it to whatever. But yes, timing still is going to affect like some aspects of it, right? Especially if that person is not. But I mean, it sounds like the people you're working with are like have authority, right? They have the decision making ability, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes maybe it's a matter of bandwidth or change management, or they think like, oh, it's going to be disruptive or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. Like there's definitely like most of what we can do is controllable within the discovery phase.
Yeah.
Um, at least you hope.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm super excited. I'm so happy for you that you're crushing it. I think you always have so much wisdom and you do. And I think if if you're doing this well and you're quote unquote not as confident as you think you could be, dude, you're gonna be crushed. You're gonna be. I'm afraid, honestly, to see the results. Like once you quote unquote
No.
become confident, like that's just gonna be scary. That's gonna be awesome, man. Like I'm definitely excited to see what that yields. Because it just seems like you're very humble. You have the right mentality, so the sky's the limit for you.
Hopefully, we'll see. Yeah, there's so much to work on. Yeah, I think in sales, like there's always things to craft and work on and figure out. So it's exciting though.
Is your goal eventually to be like a key account manager for LSS, or are you trying to be manager or director? Have you thought that far ahead?
I don't know if I've necessarily thought everything through. I think I need to start thinking more about that. Definitely focus like, hey, I got the next role. Like my sort of all my focus is in this current role and performing
Mm.
and succeeding here, and then helping my teammates and helping my manager succeed. So yeah, I've definitely been focused on the current role. Yeah, I mean, I think long term, like forward looking, 10 years down their line, like a director of sales would be an amazing experience. So
Mm.
trying to work backwards from there, like what are some of the experiences that I need to have to
Uh,
put myself in a position to be there. So
cool.
I actually was just having a conversation about that, and so
Mm.
it's a helpful exercise. Be like, okay, where do I want to be in 10 years?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to think about. So my manager asked me like, what would you want your LinkedIn profile to say in 10 years? Which I thought was a fun way to put it.
Nice.
Um,
I like
and
that.
then yeah, just kind of understanding, okay, like what are the paths other people have taken to get there? Like what type of
Mm.
experiences are helpful? Um, so yeah, definitely trying to figure that out right now, but very much so focused on obviously the current role and succeeding and learning and failing and doing all the fun stuff right now. So
The Tom Brady of sales. You guys heard it from here first, man.
I don't know
We,
about that.
this is gonna be worth this conversation is gonna be worth a lot of money one day. So
If it was can you make this an NFT? What's that?
non-fungible tokens.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I should like I could sell it for like 10,000 Bitcoins one day, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that all works. I haven't dug too much into that, but that's
Well,
funny.
yeah, well, I appreciate you, Ryan. Any last closing remarks or any advice for anyone who similar to you, like have recently transitioned or is thinking about transitioning into their first pure hunter role who came from like the SDR/BDR background?
Yeah, I think just mimicking the role as much as possible in what you're doing now. It's a great time to learn, to test things out, to fail. So you'll be in a better position when you start. Definitely going to be lots of failures.
Hmm.
Um, Definitely lots of calls that don't go your way. So that's something I'm experiencing right now. But the more you
Hmm.
can do beforehand, the more you're going to be set up for success. So I think use that time to really craft and hone your skills. That'll probably be my biggest piece, and then really just embrace learning as much as possible. I feel like there's so many elements of the role that are hard to learn. Some that will take a lot of time, some that
Hmm.
are more process oriented. So there's lots of things to figure out, which I'm in the middle of right now. So it'll all work out though.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate our friendship. And, I think you're just a great guy. And, every time I have a conversation with you or when you hit me up randomly, I always feel like super lucky. I'm like, yes, Ryan Johnson reached out to me. Like, this is a good day. So yeah, and you always come bearing gifts, right? And half the time when you reach out, it yields really nice gifts, right? Help me buy this house, help me get married. So
Oh
thanks,
my
thanks
gosh.
again, man. You're the
Hey,
freaking man. Appreciate you.
well, I'm just excited that you respond to me. I don't know if the podcast knows, but Davidson's pretty famous at LinkedIn, and he just announced that his last day is coming up. So I don't know if the podcast knows, but he's pretty successful himself, moving on to some new things that I think really align with your goals and your vision. So
Thank
can't think
you.
of a better place for you to go. I was like, I was trying to think about it. I was like, what could be a better next play for you? I'm not quite sure. Like in terms of a product Davidson fit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's funny to see like we spend so much, it's interesting, right? We spend so much time with each other at LinkedIn that it's like we know each other so well, right? And I think that's the beauty of work. You think about how much time you spend at work, and it's a lot of times more than you guys know me better than most of my relatives, right? Like if you think about it, like we've had like let's say we've spent 35 to 40 hours together, like in like the past year, right? And then even beyond the past year, probably even more than that, right? That's more than I spend with like 98% of the world. I feel like, you
Yeah, for
know.
sure. Yeah, you see people in split moments like Thanksgiving or different
Yeah.
holidays, and yeah, a lot like most of your extended family for sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
an interesting way to put it. So yeah, definitely always good to like the people that are around you and you work with. So feel thankful for that. But we'll definitely we'll miss you, Davidson. But thanks for having me on today. Uh, Always a pleasure and excited to maybe do this again next year, episode 200.
Yes, yes. We'll celebrate. We'll do the mid-market, the Ryan Johnson mid-market account executive update.
Oh,
That'll
I
be
don't know
dope.
about that.
Hey, it'll happen. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. RJ. Does anyone call you RJ?
I've got, yeah, people call me RJ. People call me lots of different stuff. I'm open to it. I got a very generic name, so anything to make it a little more interesting.
Wait, what else do people call you?
The people call me by my last name, Johnson.
Uh,
Um, I'm trying to think. John, sometimes I get called John. I've got
Really?
lots of it.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything that goes with Ryan Johnson, I've been called before at some point in time. So
Oh, I just thought of a combined name or dual name. So when we're hanging out, people should call us Sun Sun.
Sons, oh, because yeah, you got
It's
Davidson.
Davidson and Johnson. So they should be like Sun Sun.
I like that. That's good.
Next time if I see you in person, I'm gonna call you Sun Sun.
I like it. That's hilarious.
Yeah. All right, brother. Have a good one and keep crushing it, man. Keep shining.
I'll do my best. Thanks, Davidson.
Take care.
Bye.